Good morning, everybody. Genevieve Richardson with Life Speech Pathology and the Life Speech Pathology Show. I am so excited to welcome our next guest. I met Dr. Katie Strong at the Aphasia Access Conference that I attended. You've all heard at least a half a dozen shows about that conference, and I keep referencing it because the theme of it, just talking to a lot of other speech pathologists that were there for the first time, we found our people. I felt for the first time, this is the people I need to be with. These are the movers and the shakers and the doers in the aphasia community. And I was so inspired by Katie, hearing her presentation, hearing what she's doing at the Strong Story Lab. And we're going to get all into that. But right before I bring her on, I just want to bring your attention for those of you who've been following me on social media. I have pulled together a course. This course, it's simple, it's direct, it's straightforward, and it's real. And what I'm talking about is we talk about the basics of aphasia, the basics of cognition, and we tie all of those together and put a big bow on it and talk about communication strategies that apply based on what the kind of aphasia you have and the kind of cognitive deficits you have. This is just an introductory course to get the juices flowing, so to speak, but there's a lot of great information in there. If you would like to check it out, there's my graphic. You can check that out by going, I'm trying to push my right buttons, up in the top corner here, if I'm pointing to the right corner, is a QR code. The course is called Unlocking Aphasia. It's a video course, it's straightforward modules, and I hope you'll go and check it out. Give me feedback. Let me know if this is something that you're interested in or if we need to do a pivot and attack it some other way. So without further ado, I'm going to take that down, and I'm going to welcome Katie Strong.
Hi, Genevieve. Thanks so much for having me today.
So grateful
so excited
to have you here. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule.
My pleasure. Pleasure.
Just to embarrass you, I pulled up your bio on
Okay.
Central Michigan University. So this is Katie Strong.
Fire up chips. Fire up chips.
Katie Strong is the Associate Professor at Central Michigan University's Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders, where she leads the Strong Story Lab and is the Midwest Regional Coordinator for Project Bridge. Very cool. So I don't know about Project Bridge, but I want to know about it. So where would you like to jump in today?
Well, gosh, we could do just a quick little something about Project Bridge and then get into the storytelling. Yeah, so Project Bridge is a PCORI-funded grant. PCORI is a patient-centered outcomes institute, and Jackie Hinckley down in Florida at Nova Southeastern University got this grant to bring aphasia researchers, people with aphasia, clinicians, and their family members together to be able to talk about how to collaborate on research projects to make research more meaningful for the people who are benefiting from all of the research that's happening. So
that sounds like a perfect marriage.
Absolutely.
Neat.
Absolutely.
And what is your role in Project Bridge?
Yeah, so I attended the very first Project Bridge, and where I learned about collaborating. They call it stakeholder engaged research or co-designed research, where we learn how to be good team members with one another and teach each other our values and expertise. And then it got funded again, and they did this kind of hub and spoke model. And one of the spokes was in the Midwest. And so I serve as the coordinator in the Midwest for Project Bridge. So we do on occasion trainings for people who are interested in getting started in research or becoming active on a research team. And you know, we've had some presentations and publications, and we've got a really great website. Let's see, it's Project Bridge, and I'm not sure if it's .org. I'll have to do a little search here really quick. I should be
Oh,
better
that's
at
all
that,
right.
but we'll make sure.
I
We'll
got
make
a
sure to get it
helper.
for you. Perfect.
So
Thank
I
you.
typed that in.
Absolutely.
We'll double check that link and make sure it's good, and we can keep
Sounds
going.
great. But all are welcome. Yes. But yeah, so we're really here though to talk about
Love it.
stories.
I just love,
Mhm.
and I feel like I've always talked with my clients about their stories and what's meaningful to them, but I've never
Mhm.
done it formally. But that's kind of what your project is about.
It is. Yeah. I mean, stories are really the fabric of who we are as people. And, in fact, some people believe that we are the stories that we tell. So, kind of that we are what we eat, right? We are who we say we are. And, so I was really interested in bringing stories to our clinical work with people with aphasia because, they really are how we connect with people. They're how, something happens to you and you're like, wait, let me tell you, or you've got to hear. And so being able to collaborate with people with aphasia in the clinic room to support them in storytelling has been a passion of mine for a while now.
Neat. So, how does it work? How does Strong Story
Yeah,
Lab run?
absolutely. Well, one thing, I guess, a starting point is thinking about like if we believe that we are the stories that we tell, we have some concepts about identity or self or who we are as a person, and that's kind of a narrative. And so, stories are really powerful, and they are vehicles to make meaning out of
Yeah.
things, all sorts of life events. But in the case of having aphasia, it can be making sense out of the chaos that's happened. You were living your life and everything was grand, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this stroke or head injury or tumor or whatever it was that caused the disruption in language. And so this major life event has happened. And it's important because we all as humans use stories to process things that are happening. And so people with aphasia are at a disadvantage in storytelling because the primary tool that you use in storytelling is language, right? And so when you're talking or you're understanding or your reading or your writing is impacted, it makes storytelling challenging, which then can maybe have you feel stuck in where you're at if you're not able to explore and process that. So I really, have been learning a lot about stories over the last probably 8 years or so, and am excited to be able to share one technique in how clinicians might be able to bring story into the clinic room to help their clients move
I would
forward.
love to hear that technique. Um,
Yeah.
Before we jump into that, I wanted to explore just a little bit more about this whole
Hmm.
sense of identity. I work with
Yes.
so many, primarily stroke survivors who've had aphasia for
Hmm.
years, and they're
Yes.
all in these different levels of coping,
Hmm.
processing. Um, some still struggle with depression. Some are trying to fight their way out of that and figure out who they are now. How
Hmm.
does story assist with that process?
Absolutely. Well, as I said earlier, it can be a really powerful vehicle for moving forward. And I think, this concept of identity, thinking about who we are, who we were, who we want to be, are really essential components of being human. And if you're feeling stuck in some place, it can really contribute to feeling depressed or anxious or scared, or those sorts of things. And one of the things that I wanted to share with you is that it's not just nice to share stories these days. Stories have actually been connected to improving mental health. So, there's, it's pretty powerful. There's this, they call it the stepped psychological care model that Ian Kneebone and some others have brought from the UK and Australia into the stroke world within the UK and Australia, about like this stepped model where they acknowledge that every stroke survivor has challenges with mental health and depression and anxiety, and that regardless of who you are, everyone should have supports in having mental health support. And so this stepped care is like at the bottom level. Everybody should have access to things like support groups or communities to support them in moving forward. And there are a bunch of areas in this bottom tier, but storytelling is one of those areas where it's not something that requires lots of specialized training. Like in the higher levels of that step care model are things that a mental health counselor would be providing that require more skill and training to be able to offer. So I guess what I want is a long-winded way of saying storytelling is powerful. I think storytelling is powerful, but other people are saying storytelling is powerful also in helping people to be able to have better sense of well-being and connect with others.
So true. My favorite thing is beginning of every session is a little bit of chit chat. What have you done today and what happened over the weekend? And that just gets people engaged. Something as simple as that.
Absolutely. And I think, you were talking about people who are living with chronic communication impairment due to aphasia. We know aphasia is a chronic health condition. It's not going to just disappear, one day. And so I think that, story is a powerful way of helping people to really honor who they were and prior to having aphasia, experience what is happening currently with their life and aphasia. And then, I think to me, the most important part is visualizing what the future holds and thinking about goals and where they might like to head. So I think, that's really, to me, an important aspect
I
of all
love
of this.
I love all of that, but the component that just stood out to me is if we're as professionals working in this context of storytelling, we can
Mhm.
help the person with aphasia develop and brainstorm and know that something more is possible, that they can keep moving forward. They don't have to stay stuck. It's that hope.
Absolutely. Yes. It's kind of, having a sense of purpose and meaning is really what life is all about. And so, being able to visualize what, that's what we all do, right? Regardless of whether or not we have aphasia, we're thinking about what our plans and goals and aspirations are for future.
Let's circle back to that technique you referenced a few minutes ago.
Absolutely. So the My Story project is what I developed during my dissertation, and that's typically the model that I use. There are lots of different ways of storytelling, but essentially, we framed this off of Dan McAdams is a psychologist who does a lot of identity work, and he really talks about this. who you were, who you are, and who you want to be. And so the technique is really, it's not anything fancy. It's really like inviting someone with aphasia to say, would you like to explore developing your story with me, right? So it's important. Number one is that both parties, the clinician and the client, need to be interested in storytelling. Just like any other therapeutic technique, it's not for everybody all the time. And so you want to make sure, because this can be very personal, or it should be very personal. And so, someone who isn't interested in doing this at this point in time, you should be looking at other sorts of things. But essentially, anywhere from 6 sessions to, with our students, we've done it during a semester, so 12 sessions, 1-hour sessions is what we are typically doing. But again, you can modify this for whatever you have. We're doing a lot of listening to what people with aphasia are interested in sharing. They might bring in photos or pictures, or depending on their communication skills, they may write some of their components of the story. My story model that we've used is essentially 6 or 8 sessions of interaction with the clinician and I'll say client, but I'm going to probably call him storyteller from here on out, right? The storyteller. And with a goal of having some sort of verbal presentation that they would share publicly with a supportive, invited audience. And so, we don't just get to sitting down and writing right away. The first couple of sessions might just be a lot of listening and hearing where people are at and things that they might want to explore. And then it's really kind of setting up the story, but it is on that framework of who I was before my stroke, aphasia, my head injury, whatever the issue is, and where I am now, and then goals for the future. A lot of people then have, we usually at the beginning, I guess, of the interaction, we have the end in mind with regard to who we're going to be sharing that with. But I'll tell you this, sometimes it just kind of spreads like wildfire. And then after they share it one time, they're, often sharing it in other places as well.
I think it's just so empowering to give back a sense of control, to tell your story, however it needs to be supported. But the point is, the story is still getting out, and it's the person with aphasia, it's their words. They are the storyteller. What's important to them, they share it.
Absolutely. And, I see, I'm just looking a little bit in the comments, Genevieve, and I see that Megan's asking about talk therapy in trauma patients. And I do want to say this is not a narrative based psychology intervention. So I do think that there's some overlap there, but we're really talking about providing, someone an opportunity to, with supported communication techniques that clinicians as speech pathologists are quite well skilled at, being able to help them express themselves in this way, so that they may then be able to share this story with whoever they might like to be. So I kind of gave a squishy answer there, Megan, but there's a little gray area with that, but it's not necessarily narrative therapy for trauma as, within the psychology area.
Great. Okay.
I do think, I'm not sure, Genevieve, I guess I wanted to maybe talk a little bit about like the clinical skills that are necessary for this type of work, because it's not really just about like the product of the story, right?
Process.
I mean, that's a beautiful
process
outcome.
and the product.
Exactly. That process is really essential. And so I think, as I said earlier, the number one criteria is that both the clinician and the client are interested in this, in collaborating in this type of work. But I also think, too, that we have to be very focused on um, distributing the power in the clinical session so that the storyteller is empowered to share their expertise about their life and what they want to share, and the clinician is sharing their expertise in how to organize things or facilitate communication or maybe format the story. And so it's a different type of, sometimes in clinical sessions, it's the SLP directing the client in what to do or where we're going. And this really is collaborative. We call it, co-constructing stories. So the story really belongs to the storyteller, but the clinician is influencing how that story might be shared or told, or those types of things. So I do think it's really about partnerships.
Definitely.
And I do also really strongly believe that speech language pathologists, we're really good at story, right? This narrative is part of our training and those sorts of things, but we really think of story more as like having a beginning, a middle, and an end. Or we talk about story grammar, or does it make sense, or those sorts of things. But this kind of story, I think clinicians, we need to maybe expand our viewpoint on, and thinking about like the power of story and how it relates to identity. So I think clinicians doing some reading or having some training in understanding how narrative and identity are connected, so that then we can help implement this with our clients.
Definitely. And I poured over your articles that you've written. I will add those to the show notes for anybody that wants to check them out.
Great. Fantastic.
Because I have a grad student currently, and we've been working with one of our clients. After you and I spoke on the phone a couple months ago, I was like, okay, who to offer this to? And we're gonna be doing a recording with him, so he gets to have the same experience that you have right here. And it
Absolutely.
is so much fun, and for him, he has so many pictures, and so he's using his pictures to tell his story, and it's just
Yes.
it's so powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, in those articles that you were mentioning, my colleague and mentor, Barbara Shadden, and I have shared this PULSE acronym. If for clinicians that are interested in story work and kind of like dipping their toe in, and Barbara created this acronym that is PULSE, and it stands for partnership, uniqueness, listening, supporting, and exploring. And we thought that, if a clinician kind of keeps these 5 things at the center of their work as they're acting in this story work, that, it really is essential. So I kind of tipped earlier about the partnership, right? That it's really equal. We both have roles in this experience, and that we're, helping each other to guide one another in how the story moves forward, and that we honor each other's expertise at the table. Also, then, it's the U for uniqueness. Just because you've done this once with somebody, you've done it once with somebody. So you have to, be open to really recognizing that every storyteller is unique. Every type of stroke is unique. People have different severity of aphasia or different needs, or, those sorts of things, and recognizing that. The L for listening really is the heart of storytelling. And, we're listening to receive this story from the person with aphasia, and we have to be truly present during that time, during the whole, the entire time. That takes work for the clinician to, make sure that they are able to receive this gift in the way that the storyteller's sharing it. So really working on making sure that we are present when we're listening. The S is supporting. I think this is where we as SLPs excel. Typically, things like using communication ramps to support the storyteller, or supported conversation techniques, writing, gestures, pictures, all of those sorts of things. And then the E for exploring, being willing to go off road, where someone might want to talk about something that maybe you wouldn't typically talk about in a session, or do some different sorts of things. So just, I think that, really being open to exploring the story, and, also recognizing that this type of work influences and impacts not only the storyteller but the clinician as well, so that you're going through this work together.
That's how I got into this field. My earliest experience, I was introduced to a speech pathologist who specialized in esophageal speech. So his population were folks that had had laryngectomies, and I met him and worked with him over the summer with his laryngectomy support group. And it was their stories that literally brought me to this profession.
How beautiful. It's there, they really, stories they have a hook. They resonate with us as humans.
Yeah, it's where you find commonality. You compare and contrast, and you see what you have in common and what you don't. And sometimes it's the slimmest thread you can find in common,
right?
But then you can build it. That's what's yes, it's wonderful. I just love the work. Can we tie your story work into, how does that fit into the life participation approach to aphasia?
For sure. Yeah. So, the life participation approach to aphasia really says that the person with aphasia should be at the center of all decisions about their intervention and their life and living successfully. So I think storytelling fits really well within this model, is that, it's very patient centered, relationship based, and goal driven also, right? In that, as you're moving through the story, really thinking about what's next and how can that then be embedded into goal setting for therapy moving forward. Ora Kagan has that A from, or it's the assessment for living, or outcome measures for aphasia, and one of the circles, relating to the WHO, ICF, the World Health Organization's international classification system, is identity and personal factors. And so I think it really just, it also, though, we can work on language during storytelling, and we can work on environment, those sort of things, but really it's there's nothing more person-centered than having them share and create and construct a story.
We can still be targeting impairment level goals, but working under the concept or the construct of empowering this person to tell their story. And as a benefit, their confidence increases, their identity. I don't know if I would want to say solidified, but because they have to shift, right? Anytime someone's gone through a trauma such as a stroke or a traumatic brain injury, whatever the case may be, they have to shift to a new identity.
Absolutely. We might call that like renegotiating.
I love that term. I think it's
that, identity, and we're doing it as people all the time, right? You get a new job, or you go back to school, or you're married, there are different chapters, some things that happen within lives that are kind of primed for reconstructing who you are, or renegotiating who you are.
I think it's amazing. So let's swing back. We have a question here. Shaylee asks, how do you incorporate storytelling into goal writing? Goal writing, it's there. I know what I'm working on.
I know. Well,
how do I phrase it? Yes.
Well, I guess, there are two ways to think about that. Goal writing, usually then from the storyteller identifies what their goals might be, so that clinically then we could put them into goals from a third party payer documentation sort of standpoint. So that, that's kind of near the end of that product. But I do think that, there are things like being able to share personal relevant factors about yourself, or, again, like breaking things down into operationalizing things, feeling comfortable talking in front of people. And one of the things I found through this work is that it also creates very real opportunities for people to go home and have more conversations with people in their life, in their household, or, we're working on something. They're like, I don't know what happened then. I was in the hospital and I really wasn't with it or something. Okay, well, so then your homework might be for you to go home and ask or call or those sorts of things. So I think there are opportunities to embed like real conversations, or being able to, I don't know, if we need to count things or something, right, like for goals or something, that how many times are you reaching out to family or friends to connect with them, to ask about things, and these gives opportunities for that. So I don't want to say, I guess I want to say that it really should be individualized, if that makes sense, with as all therapy should be. And so I think it really depends on, like, you're sitting at the table, you decide, oh, we're interested in pursuing this story work. And then what are the other goal areas that we see from whatever assessments or those sorts of things, and how can that be embedded into supporting this through then that story work?
Something as simple as empowering the person with aphasia to ask questions, have them practice. How do they start
Yes,
a conversation
exactly.
to get
Yes,
that information that might be missing from their story? Asking
absolutely.
questions, asking follow-up, yeah, it just takes
Writing it.
a little
Mhm,
creativity. I feel like our profession is shifting for the better to look at this more
mhm,
whole
mhm.
person
Yes,
approach, and that's what's so exciting to see. We're not
it
just
really
working on,
is.
"Oh, what's their percentage accuracy for yes, no questions?" Yeah,
Right,
that's by so, and I think
right.
another byproduct of the storytelling is them
Mhm,
learning
mhm.
how to advocate for themselves.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think that advocacy work, not, it's not a guarantee for doing storytelling where, it's, like you're going to become an advocate. But I think a lot of people, after doing this work or while doing this work, recognize that they are able to share very relevant and moving stories to advocate for, whether it's aphasia awareness. Here we are in
Right.
June, right? It's Aphasia Awareness Month, or whether it's having them have their friends or their church community or work colleagues or whatever know what happened to them, but also maybe how to be a better communicator with them. What are some things that they can do as people in their life to be a better supported communication partner? So I agree.
I see that with the increase in confidence, that the
Hmm.
person with aphasia might start initiating more, like when they go to church or garden club.
Yes.
And what that does is it starts to break down that barrier, that wall with people who don't understand aphasia, and they stay away
Mm.
because they don't want to offend or embarrass themselves or embarrass the person.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I do.
yeah, I've seen this with a couple of my clients recently. Not only do we work on the
Mhm.
impairment stuff, but we work on these bigger global goals, not necessarily telling their story, but helping them achieve whatever it is they're wanting, whether it's at work or, communicating at church.
Mhm.
And they're noticing that people are starting to interact with them more.
Right. And that's like infectious, because then they feel more confident and are willing to take more risks and be able to, that's a
And
beautiful
if we
thing.
can
It really
involve
is.
the communication partner, the spouse, the partner,
Hmm.
who a friend. See, I'm on telepractice all day, so I'm Zooming all day. So the beauty of that
Yeah,
is I can bring everybody,
absolutely.
so we
It's
can
great,
do a
isn't
little
it?
bit of communication partner training to help keep breaking down those barriers. Because as we know, starting a new habit and how
Mhm.
we communicate is not easy.
Mm,
So anyway, I think storytelling and empowering our folks is just so powerful. What else would you like to
I
share,
agree.
Katie?
Well, we had talked a little bit about like student training in this area. And, how do we get more clinicians doing story work? And one way is to think about training students who are currently in their master's programs within the speech language pathology discipline. And so we've started doing some training at CMU through the Strong Story Lab. And we've been, we do some of our work in our Carl Center, which is our campus clinic where people might come to us in person, or we do some telepractice that way also. Um, but we also have done a more structured program through Virtual Connections for Aphasia, which is a collaborative venture between the Aphasia Recovery Connection, or ARC, and Lingraphica. And we have this program called Aphasia, This Is Our World. And that was named by one of our storytellers. But essentially, we are training students to become story coaches. They go through, they have a class on aphasia with me at the university, but we also do training in identity and story and how those are related. We do some supported conversation training with them. Bree Beeger, who collaborates with me through Lingraphica, does some training on AAC use and how to support people with using devices if that's what they're using to communicate. And so once the training is done, it's about 4 hours of training prior to starting the session. We have this. As I said earlier, about 12 weeks of the semester. We have I usually have 6 students and 6 storytellers who are members from the Virtual Connections community who are interested in creating their stories. And we do some story work virtually. And each storyteller and student coach are paired, and they work as a team to be able to create their story. The students are supported by Dr. Beeger and I in the Zoom, so providing supervision and those sorts of things. And then the identified goal of the product, the story, will be shared in after those 12 weeks in the Virtual Connections community, as what they call a member spotlight. And it's really beautiful, because we've got this small community of storytellers and student coaches working together through the 12 weeks, and then bringing it into that beautiful Virtual Connections community, where sometimes we'll have anywhere from 30 to 60 Virtual Connections members come and hear the stories, and then ask questions and celebrate together. So it's really
That's neat.
beautiful.
I will be talking to Allie Reed of Virtual Connections. So she'll be
Wonderful.
joining me in a couple of weeks. Stay tuned, folks.
That's
We're going full
fantastic.
circle.
I love it. Well, I just wanted to say we've done a little bit of research with the
Mhm.
students on what this experience was like for them, and it's powerful experience, and it's something that they've expressed that when they first started, they're like, I'm not sure what I'm doing, or if this is working, or that was really intense. We do have debrief sessions with the students as a team after each of the week long session, or the week sessions. But they've really expressed that they feel better able to understand the importance of relationship-centered care, right? This idea that it's a partnership and that I don't have to, I am the expert, but I don't have, that doesn't mean I have to lead with an iron hand during the session, that it's really collaborative. They also talked about how it adjusted their clinical thinking, and that maybe data taking isn't always about a percentage, but it can also be about, a larger goal, a bigger way of thinking about how to measure things, and that also this was an emotional experience for them, that it was navigating the person with aphasia or the storyteller's emotions as well as their own emotions, and so having a space to be able to process that. But I do feel like they really enjoy the work. It's hard work. They enjoy it, and we're also thinking more internationally about how we might start training students across the globe. So I'm meeting regularly with colleagues in Germany and the UK and the Netherlands to see if we might be able to collaboratively put together some of our work to show that this type of clinical intervention is worthwhile.
Yeah, yeah, that it's just a matter of, writing it up. I absolutely
Yep.
know that this is worthwhile. The satisfaction clients have, because we can use
Yes.
something as simple as a rating, like what was their communication confidence like when they started
Mhm.
and where is it now? I mean, we can use
Absolutely.
any kind of a rating, and as long as we can measure it and show
Yes. Yep.
progress.
And I think, sometimes like using goal attainment
Love it.
scaling with something like this would really,
Yep.
pair well.
Wonderful. All right, Katie, thank you. I loved our
My
conversation.
pleasure.
And I'm excited that the aphasia community, the audience members that I'm reaching, get to hear that there's another option out there. And they can encourage their clinician if they're already in the middle of therapy. And
Absolutely.
what do you think they should ask for? What if their clinician that they're working with hasn't heard of the life
Mhm.
participation approach?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I would say reach out, have them reach out to a colleague and maybe ask or do a Google search. The Aphasia
Mhm.
Access website really has some beautiful resources on life participation approach to aphasia. I will, I guess, maybe just disclose I'm a
Yes.
interviewer for the Aphasia Access Conversations
Yes.
podcast. So a little biased there, but there are hundreds
I
now,
know.
100 plus conversations with people who are experts in the life participation approach. That's researchers, clinicians, people with aphasia. And so there's content out there that, is accessible. And like you said at the beginning of this podcast, to me, like joining Aphasia Access and being a part of the leadership summit really was just like coming home, like finding my people. It was just, really, it's a beautiful sort of experience. And I think I had a recent podcast interview with Mary Ann Eller, who was at the Aphasia Access Summit. And we had a beautiful conversation. Mary Ann is at Duke University. She's a clinician. And the title of that podcast is Your Permission Slip to Do Secret
Mhm.
Therapy. And and the secret therapy is life participation approach to aphasia. She felt like she was kind of doing it all along, but she had to like hide it because it wasn't like measurable or those sorts of things. And she's like, when she found life participation approach and aphasia access, it was just like the light was
I
shining on
feel
her and she felt
exactly,
validated.
absolutely exactly the
Yeah.
same way. I had attended Dr. Melinda Corwin's presentation at the Texas Speech Language Hearing Association in March. I
Yes.
attended her course, and I'm like, wow, I just loved it because I've always been a functional therapist. I did home health for years and
Yes.
years and
Yeah.
years and years. So, oh, this is great. And you know who benefits is I know we benefit. I mean, selfishly, I know I benefit as a clinician because this is
Yeah.
such gratifying work, but our clients are getting back to
Mhm.
life
Yes.
and they're finding themselves and their new path forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Katie, thank you so much. I will add to the show notes all the relevant links. We'll put in a link to your podcast because it's excellent, everybody. You need to check it out. And Katie, thank you. Have a lovely day. I don't know if you have a heat wave
Thanks,
in
Genevieve.
Michigan. We do here in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, we don't. We have smoke
Oh,
from Canada. We have, like, air quality issues happening
yeah,
at the
yeah, you're
moment,
right there on the
so
front lines of that smoke. We're not getting it
yeah,
down here. But we got the heat. We're in the we've been
yeah,
in the
yeah, it's
hundreds,
pretty serious.
so
Absolutely. Stay
will do.
cool.
All right.
Alright,
Thank
thanks
you.
again.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.